This is Leaders in the Trenches, and your host today is Gene Hammett.
Hi, my name is Gene Hammett. I'm the host of Leaders in the Trenches. My question for you today is, are you leveraging the media at your fullest potential? What is leveraging the media anyway? Well, if you are being recognized for the work that your company's doing, the impact that it's making in the world, for the progress you're making towards your mission, then you are being or leveraging the media. So how do you leverage it to your fullest potential? Well, you've got to get specific about your strategies. Today is a special episode because I wanted to go and do something that I rarely ever do. I did one last week, so that was the first time. This is the second episode, but I opened myself up to being coached by an expert in this area. Our expert today is Kate Delaney. Kate is an Emmy award-winning journalist. She is known as well in the sports world as she is in the business world, and she talks about leveraging media, becoming a rock star in your industry, and about how you do that. We talk about some very specific things today that will help you if you take notes and take really focus around what to do. You may not have the same things available to me. You may not have a podcast. You may not write for different publications like I do, but you can still do what is talked about inside this message. Kate talks about leveraging the media so that you can actually become the rock star in your industry. Again, a special episode today where I'm getting coached. It's a little bit longer than normal, so excuse me for that, but I think there's some insights in there to help you understand the media better so that you can get more press, so that you can get more recognition. Just as a side note, I have been working on doing some of the strategies inside here since we talked a few weeks ago and starting to get some traction around that. I recently came into Entrepreneur Magazine as one of the top speakers. I've got a few more things cooking with some writers that I know around speaking and also around what I'm doing inside my business that's a little bit unique around fast growth companies. So stay tuned for more media coming out from me. But in the meantime, tune into this episode with Kate Delaney talking to me about leveraging the media, and you'll get more insights about how to move your business to the next level. All right, here's the interview. Hi, Kate. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing, Gene?
I'm fantastic. A little nervous because this is a different kind of experience today. Instead of me interviewing you on your expertise, and I've already let our audience know a little bit who you are, but you're going to be coaching me today. We're going to make this an episode. So I'm putting myself out there for the benefit of the audience. Before we get there, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and who you serve?
Sure, absolutely. I am all about creating buzz for my clients. In other words, making them the rock star, the celebrity, the authority in whatever their field is. How do they expand that expertise so the world knows their greatness? Because often when you're in a niche, even if you are crushing it, the rest of the world doesn't really know you, and how much money are you leaving on the table and how much more leverage could you get? And my career has been in front of a camera, or I've been writing my whole life, whether it was traditionally newspapers, etc., or now blogs, and obviously interviewing people. So I've interviewed over 16,000 people, a lot of them rock stars in business. And the one thing that the true rock stars, whether they're in business, sports, politics, whatever, that they all had in common is they were tenacious and they doggedly pursued through people around them, through what they were doing, the idea of becoming known in their space, but also beyond their space. And that helped them capture really bigger business and very, very broad connections, because you never know who's connected to whom and what could end up being just an incredible opportunity. So really, my word is about leverage and creating, as I said at the beginning, that leverage. What are you missing? What could you be leveraging? What do you have to, frankly, offer the world that would be fabulous for people who would have a chance to get to know you, whether it's through a mainstream publication or maybe even a more of some of the niche opportunities that are out there that you could expand upon even more?
Well, that gives us an idea of what you do and who you are. You're also known, I don't know, maybe people recognize the voice. You have a background in sports.
I do. And what happened was I'm the prime example of this, Gene. I liked sports as a kid growing up, and I was a TV anchor, and somebody on the set, one of the guys I worked with, convinced me, you know more about sports than I do. When I go away, I think you should fill in for me. So he pushed to make that happen. And then I decided, you know what? My three things really are business, politics, and sports. And I wanted that real opportunity to feel what it was like to do sports and have the chance to be able to cover teams and do a sports talk show. And sure enough, it took 500 rejections, but I ultimately got there. And absolutely, that's part of the 16,000 people, are a lot of those rock stars that I got to interview, which was really cool about breaking through the glass ceiling, because I traveled with the Dallas Cowboys, covered the New York Yankees, worked in the biggest station in the United States. It was really awesome.
The 500, you left out something there that you normally tell, and I guess maybe this is from stages, but how many times did you actually try to get into the locker room with these professional athletes?
Oh, it took hundreds and hundreds of times before that actually happened. And then when it finally did, I'm not a nervous person, but of course I dropped the microphone because my hands were sweating, and you had 70 naked men in various forms of undress. That's where I say I learned to look up, that all of a sudden we're very quiet when that microphone dropped.
Hi there, this is Gene. I'm the host of Leaders in the Trenches. I wanted to give you a free gift. I've been working with Audible for almost a year now because my book published last year, and I've been listening to Audible books for probably 3 or 4 years. I really love it, and I wanted to give you a free gift. If you want a 30-day free trial of Audible, all you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/Leaders in the Trenches. That will give you access to any book you want. You don't have to buy The Trap of Success, which is my book. You can buy any book you want. So if there's something you've been wanting to read, just don't have time, make sure you go to audibletrial.com/Leaders in the Trenches. All right, back to the interview. All right, so that gives you, our listener, a little bit about who you are. So this is a different take today. And I know you've done this many times before. So you've looked at the podcast, you've looked at, writing for Inc. magazine, you've looked at some of the other media that I've done. The Inc. magazine article, Entrepreneur article that came out earlier this year has been something I'm proud of, where it was listed one of the top motivational speakers for 2019. And I was just been thinking, how do I leverage this into bigger place? And that's the reason why we're having this conversation. So where do you want to go from here, Kate?
Well, one of the things you have to do is, first of all, you have to develop a target list. I mean, what would be the ultimate places that you want to be seen in? Do you want to be quoted in the Wall Street Journal? What would it mean to be in other publications, to be somebody that's sought after for quotes when it comes to growth, when it comes to business? How do you combine your niche, what your expertise is, with your target? Who are your big targets? You got to make that list, and you have to know the people that can get you there. So in other words, the big mistake a lot of people do when they're trying to leverage is they say that question. It's like when somebody asks you, well, how much money do you want to make? And you say, well, $10 million a year. Okay, well, what's your business plan? So what's your media plan? How do you go after those people, and who are those people? So who are the reporters? Know their names and know what they cover. You're not just blindly throwing darts. I don't understand why people do it, but I see it all the time in a lot of the big companies where I've worked with people, and even individual incredible entrepreneurs. They'll say to me, oh, well, I want this, this, and this, but they have no idea what they're covering. They're not paying attention to the world around them. And one of the other things you have to do, so you put that target list together. I would love to be quoted in the Wall Street Journal. I'd love to be in Time magazine in an article. Shoot big and then shoot smaller. So you put that list together of huge national places where you want to be, and then look around you regionally. Where could you be quoted? There's business journals everywhere. For you, you're in Atlanta. So why aren't you the go-to person for the business journal in Atlanta? What if you were quoted 6, 7 times in that business journal. Guess what? A lot of prominent people pick it up and read it, people who could hire you, and you become that rock star there. And then a lot of times in those business journals, it even expands across the United States to the other publications in that same realm. So you want to think big, and then you want to think regionally. And speaking of regionally, who has reach in radio? Because radio is still relevant. Yes, there's podcasting, and you know that from the success you've had with podcasting. But what about the rest of the world that's still out there driving around in their cars, in traffic, in a city where you live? And a lot of people probably listening to this are in that same boat. Who are the so-called known personalities on morning shows? And it can be a news-oriented morning show. It can be kind of a wacky morning show if something that you do fits into what they would talk about. Because there's something about the power of that. Trust me, I am in media, but I am a sought-after guest on some very popular radio shows and in publications like the Wall Street Journal. And guess what? That's led to business for me. So not just being in my own media platform, but the fact that other people are seeking me out as an expert and asking me for my opinion, and somebody hears it and then they pursue me, that shows you the power of leveraging the media you get. But the question is getting that media. You have to come up with that list. You have to know what they talk about. So in other words, if you have to take you take the DVR and you DVR some of where the places where you'd like to be on. So you really know how they operate, how that personality is, and who they like. That way they'll have you on if you can create the right pitch. So that's number one. You have to know who the targets are, and so many people don't do that. They just throw out the blanket statement of, oh, I want to be on MSNBC, I want to be on ABC, I want to be on the Today Show, I want to be on Good Morning America. You have to target that. Definitely.
When I think about this, we definitely want to talk about how do you engage with them, but let's back up to the whole target list. Like, I never thought about the Wall Street Journal, and maybe I should. I typically think about Forbes, Fast Company. A lot of the people I work with now and the people that I admire read three publications. They read Fast Company, Inc., and Harvard Business Journal. And I asked them, that comes up over and over and over. So you think that's the best play for me, or do you think I should think even broader than that?
I think you think even broader than that, because you don't want to take over. It's like I say, do you want the map or do you want the territory? I'm just going to tell everyone I want the territory. So I don't just want the map. I think, yes, absolutely. Those places, Harvard Business Review, of course. Every place that you just mentioned it's all fantastic. But why wouldn't you want to be in the other spots as well? Why wouldn't you want to have a guest shot on Fox Business News, let's say, or CNBC or any of those? Because that only adds to your credibility, and more people, Gene, get the chance to hear your message. So shoot for the moon and see what happens. And absolutely, you have the prestige of the places you really want to be seen in, but there's no reason why you can't pursue the others that are equally as good and have a different, broader, maybe, audience.
So I want to take the devil's advocate to this, because I know I've had people go, you should get on like these noonday shows. And I kind of joke and smile. I'm like, well, who's at home watching noonday? People who don't have jobs. Not my ideal client. And I know there's more to it than that. Like, you get the video clips, you can leverage that. And a lot of times if you want to be on like a CNBC, that's not the first place you've showed up on TV. They've seen you, or they know that you've been on 5 other stations, and you've carried yourself fairly well. Is there some truth to that?
There's a complete truth to that.
Okay.
Because if you're solid, this is what a producer wants, and this is ultimately what the talent wants. They want to know that you have what we call chops. So they can go to you and you give good answers and you're interesting and people gravitate towards you, and you're conversational with, especially if it's that format, with whoever the host is, and they'll go back to you again and again. And that's the beauty of that. So for me, that I have relationships like that have been developed because I know the producer knows I'm reliable and good. And then the people on camera know that I give good media, so that I'm provocative, funny, and have some sort of message that will draw people in because they want to get ratings. So that helps them, and that's what they're looking for.
So would you say regional leads to national?
Yeah, regional can lead to national. There's no question about it, because then you've got the proof, like, hey, Gene's been on 35 shows, and here's what he's had to talk about before, and in the trenches, here's what's really sexy and exciting that your listeners will care about. For example, I'm just using that as the twist, and I can give you some really good examples of that. This is somebody to look up for anybody out there that's listening to us, Steve Spangler, who has a niche. He blows things up. He's the science guy. He's on the Discovery Channel. He's also happens to be a speaker, but he started to go on a show where he lived in Denver. And I think it was every week they would have him on, like on a Monday, and he would do silly, funny things using science, and it was really cool. And people tuned in and they watched him, and that got his name even out there a little bit more, bigger, so to speak. And now he's been on the Ellen show probably more than a dozen times, and it doesn't get much bigger than that. She's got a very big, influential audience. And there's an example of that. Show comes on during the day, but people know who she is. She's a brand. There are plenty of corporations that pay attention and pay her big money. So to be considered practically a regular on Ellen, and you're not a famous celebrity, that's pretty darn good. And a lot of that happened because he got known regionally in a medium to large market.
So my first thought behind this is, and I see the value of this, because if we have more credibility, that leads to more credibility. It's almost like we both, you and I are both speakers, Kate. And so that small gig, you never know who's in the audience that leads to the next association or the next conference. And a lot of times that's the only way you get there, because the very best way to get a speaking gig is for someone to see you rock it on stage and go, you'd be perfect for our event.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you apply that to media, you want to kind of identify places that are good for me and the brand. And you're also saying, go wider than you would normally go. Don't just be as focused. So this is one place where I would say, if this is all about brand, go to other markets, other regional markets, possibly to get that grounding to lead to bigger markets, to lead to national, right?
Absolutely. Because, there's that old saying about, well, any publicity is good publicity, right? And there is some truth to that. So if you get known regionally, and even in areas near you, wherever it is, that only can help in that road to making you somebody who national media looks at. And look, morning shows are big. A lot of corporate people that could hire you, people with money, frankly, are watching morning shows. They're running around getting kids ready, but they've got that on in the background. They're paying attention to that. Or because we live in the world of, you can download it. If they have favorites, they download them. That's for sure. That's why now what they've done with big news media is that they certainly podcast it. And there are people that download those podcasts left and right. So it definitely doesn't hurt you. Then the key is, what is the pitch?
Well, I was going to ask you, once we have a list and we've gotten the list, as I've taken some notes here, that's the reason I keep looking down. If anybody's watching the video, it's the place, but it's also the people. It's surprising, and I'm going to say this, and maybe I'll get a bunch of pitches behind this. It's surprising how many people don't pitch me because I write for Inc., but they do pitch me because of the podcast. I'm getting 3 to 5 a day for the podcast.
Wow.
Very few come in for an article kind of traditional pitch. And we'll probably, hopefully we'll go into this because I think most pitches absolutely are terrible. But after you have the list of the places and the people, and then you've done a little bit of research on what is it, how you would fit into that, like what's their format, what do they talk about? I know from a writing standpoint, the easiest thing is, and I don't want to steal your thunder, is, I cover leadership and culture. Well, who are the other people that cover this? So people should only be pitching me on leadership and culture and growth, right? If they've done their homework. Don't pitch me on your new crypto stuff because it's real easy for me to ignore that. What do you do? What's step 2?
So the next step is, once you really know who that person is or the market you're going after, find out who the gatekeeper is. A lot of times there's an assignment editor, if it's local television, or it's the producer of the show, the morning show, the evening news, whatever it is. And that's who you need to know to send the email to, or maybe eventually call. Or if you're really clever, maybe you send them a clever video. If it's not annoying, you get to the point and you feel like it's going to work for you, then you could go that route too. But you have to figure out who the person is that does the booking. So it'd be just like anything in life, whatever business you're pursuing, you need to know who it is that makes the decision. And usually that's who those people are. The publisher, the assignment editor, like I said, is very, very big. Producers in radio and TV, because they're the ones that look at the stories ultimately and make the decision and pitch it to the rest of the crew. And then boom, they hopefully book you because that's what you want. And what is very key, and you said it, Gene, is all these people that were pitching you that there's no way you would have looked at them because they didn't realize or they didn't care. This is what he specializes in. So there's no way you're going to look at those. I'm going to tell you that I do a syndicated radio show, and especially on the West Coast, it's very popular. And I get about 700, no exaggeration, that's a big number, 700 pitches a week. And I don't look at hardly any of them because they have nothing to do with what I'm talking about. And people don't know what the show is. They just know, oh, I know who she is. I want to get on that show, or I think I want to be on that show, or gosh, if I could just get media coverage. And of course, the pitches are terrible, and they haven't even listened to a show. And you got to really know the show that you're pitching because that gives you an advantage. Why waste your time?
What are the key things that we need to know? Like, what would be the things that we need to really look at?
Here's the low-hanging fruit, as I call it. Pay attention to what is happening. 2 things. Low-hanging fruit can mean, what is the day? You know how they always have these, it's kind of cliche, but it's, today is pizza day or something. Whatever it is, there's a national day, it seems like, for everything. But maybe what you do can be tied to what that day is, or even to a holiday. Holidays are slower, so sometimes that's a good time to pitch. And guess what? Actually, a lot of people watch TV or listen to the radio during the holidays, shockingly. And what you want to do there, of course, is look at what's coming up. So, for example, whatever it is, if it's St. Patrick's Day, if it's Easter and there's a tie into Easter in the economy or something, whatever it might be, summer vacations, kids going to school, there's just a zillion stories that are always covered that you might have some really clever idea to tie yourself to that story. That's low-hanging fruit. Or the other part of that is what is happening in the world, paying attention, like when we were kids, to current events. A lot of people say to me, oh, I don't watch the news. I have no idea what's going on. That's not a good way to be. It doesn't even have to take long. Just update yourself every day. What are the top headlines? It's just like on Twitter. Why does Twitter do trending? Because that's what people are talking about. That's why there's hashtags. That's what people are talking about. So know what it is that's creating buzz every single day, because that could create the opportunity. And if you make yourself available, and you are available, and it happens to be tied to what a hot story is that day, that's tremendous. I'll give you a personal example to really nail this for all of you. I got a call on Friday, one of the last Fridays. There was a big story that broke that was in the New York Times about two women who covered the World Cup in Russia. Now, that's been a while, but this video surfaced of them being harassed. One of them kissed, another one grabbed. So media came to me because they view me as that expert to comment on women and sports. And is it any better? Are women treated still? Do they get a raw deal? So they went to me and I had to make myself available. I did 3 TV hits. I had to be able to go to a studio. I had to be able to set up a studio. And it was good for me because in the end, I ended up getting some runoff, shockingly, for a speech where the person just happened to see me on television. And I made myself available. They called me. I only had a few hours, but I know the subject matter. I could comment on it. I looked at the video. I looked at the New York Times article and then went from there. So if you can tie yourself to something currently happening, oh boy, that is a home run, because now people want to know about that story.
So a lot of that happens after you have become the rock star, because Kate, you're now the rock star. I'm trying to get to that place, right?
Yeah, yes, but you could still be the person that pitches. You see something in the morning that's this story that you say, "Wow, I am the expert to talk about that." Be aggressive. Call up the station. Hey, I know you guys cover this. I listened to you. Here's we know this story just broke about GM letting go of XYZ people. What does that mean for the company and their growth? What are they trying to do? I have some thoughts on that I think would just really nail it home for your listeners. And boom, that's how you can absolutely get on the air.
So that would be something that happens in the day. So I saw yesterday, JCPenney closes 27 stores.
Right.
And I could go in there with some kind of a pitch, and I know we'll probably talk about that a little bit more, but I would probably say something similar to, yes, there's a big change going on within our economy. How can other businesses make sure that they're not next?
Perfect.
Continue to evolve.
Absolutely. Because now if I'm out there listening, I don't want to be that person. And you know this, that when things are working, a lot of times people don't want to mess with that in companies. But why do you pay attention to the trends? Why do you look at what's happened to other companies? Because you want to avoid that. They're giving you a piece of the map and saying, don't do what we just did. So you're the perfect person to comment on that.
So that's kind of in the moment. I would call that kind of newsy. I know because I write for Inc., I see a lot of stuff going through. I don't write the newsy stuff because it's just so hard for me to do that. I mean, I guess I could. And I know it's called newsjacking. I've had David Meerman Scott on before to be able to ride the wave of that topic or that trending. But the other thing that you brought up there was, the day, right? So, maybe there's Secretary's Day. I don't know what day that is, but how far in advance would you, once you identify those key days for yourself, would you suggest like picking 5 or 6 or 7 of those days and just start planning for what that would be so that you put it on your target?
Absolutely. That's a great idea, because then that doesn't overwhelm you anyway, because you're not trying to make yourself busy chasing the media around and not earning money doing it. But that way, that gives you time to push that out. And I would say you don't want to send it to the media 2 weeks out. You don't want to get too far down the road where, hey, 5 months ahead of time, I'm sending you this, because the way media and the cycles move is so quickly, you'll get thrown in a file somewhere and who knows if they'll remember you. So I wouldn't go too far out in the pitch, but I would target the date.
What is that sweet spot? Is it 4 weeks? Is it 2 weeks? Or
I think it's 2 weeks because for most shows, even big shows like the Today Show, and I keep going back to that because they still have really decent numbers and people watch them, or Good Morning America, I guess, has more, and that's just a national show and people watch in the morning who are corporate people. So I would say, yes, 2 weeks is kind of that sweet spot. Now, I mean, you could do it 4 weeks out, but then you'd have to send another one 2 weeks, and that's okay. But you also don't want to be too obnoxious, because then you just end up in the rotating file of we're not looking at that person.
Okay. So that we talked about low-hanging fruit. Was there anything else we needed to go through in step 2?
The other thing is you could, and this depends on you, but you could create your own event. So in other words, if you did something way out of the box or something worth covering, something that was unique or had a twist that could interest somebody, then I would say you make your own pitch. It's your own, I've created this thing, here's what I'm doing. I'll give you an example that I can think of, Jean, in looking at all of your stuff. Something that you do that is unique is, yes, you have the business brain and the acumen, and you talk about growth, et cetera, and leadership and culture and all of that. But when you're on a stage, you've incorporated this ballroom dancing element that's really clever. So if there was some way to tie that to where the media could see you, well, for example, if you were speaking somewhere and you knew you were going to do that, here's the business brain and the ballroom dancer. There are stations that do what we call, and they still do them, kickers, which is the lighter story. So in a sense, you become the lighter story, but with serious background attached to it, and that makes you memorable. We remember those kinds of, who doesn't remember the reporter who was doing the very serious story, and his children came into the room, and his wife came behind him and had to pull him out? Everybody remembers that. And that's just a silly thing that happened when he was on the air. But if you do something unique and different, and you can bring a TV camera there, they can come in, then that makes that pretty interesting, I think, especially visually. That makes that pretty interesting. But it would even work for like a business journal. It would work for anybody who takes photographs. I'll give you an example. In my neck of the woods, because I'm based in Dallas, there's the Dallas Morning News, and they have dallasmorningnews.com. So newspapers are relevant digitally too. And then guess what? They come out, do a story on you, take a picture of you, and then write about what you do and how you meld these two completely different things together. That would be interesting. That could be a pitch.
So I think of this as two separate things, and they're all related, but create your own event. The example I think is perfect, is two of my good friends, one of them a client, created an event called 48 and 48, which is they create 48 websites in 48 hours for nonprofits. And so the scale of that now is phenomenal, because they don't just do it in Atlanta. They've done it in Boston. They've done it in Atlanta, I think 3 times. They've done it in New York, Boston, Minneapolis. They're basically, their goal is to do 48 of these in a year.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And they're getting press. I covered them 3 times, I think, because I would go down there and do something on the spot. And it's been really good for them business wise. And so you're talking about something like that, like you create this idea and you do it. The other piece to it would be, I'm speaking in Orlando in May. I guess you basically, it's about like that 2 weeks out pitch. You go, hey, I'm going to be in Orlando. Here's what's unique about this. So you've got to have something probably unique. It's not just like another speech. That's what you're kind of saying, right? Because that's
Sure. Because you're creating the reason to go to the event, I guess is the better way to say it. And then your piece about the event is also quite clever, takes more work, and you have to really think about it. But that absolutely works as well. That's like the Guinness Book of World Records. We're going to, build the biggest blockchain, or we're going to do whatever, and that would interest people. But when I travel, and I've been traveling a lot, and I've got a big group of speeches that are coming up in April. I'm going to Ireland. I'm going to Hawaii. I'm speaking in Georgia. I'm speaking in different places. I'm speaking in Austin, Texas. And guess what? Media's already lined up, actually, because of what me talking about dealing your own destiny. And they're interested in that as being the glass ceiling breaker. So it makes for good TV. And I'm doing a couple of morning shows in a few of those spots where I'm going to be speaking.
So I know we haven't talked about the details of the pitch Is there something between where we are right now before we go into the pitch, or do we start talking about that?
Now I think we've given people some really broad strokes and then kind of narrowed it down for them as well. The pitch, what's important is now that you know who you're targeting, and even if you're on the road somewhere and it's these stations that aren't in your neighborhood, you know who you're going to go after. One of the key elements is if you send that initial email is brevity sells. Get to the point. Everybody tends to send their resume, and I've done this. I've scaled the Eiffel Tower, and then I ate 100 pizzas, and it gets so convoluted. I'm exaggerating, but it gets so convoluted. Nobody's reading that. It's got to be short to the point. And why do we want to interview you? So on that subject line, it has to be something that grabs their attention, and then the body of what your pitch is also has to be grabbing. Who, what, where, when, and why. So why do we want to have a conversation with you? And if you can do that and really nail that, then you have a good chance of, even at the email level, of breaking through. If you don't have a great subject line and you meander and say, I wrote a book and it's a best-selling book, that's great that it's a best-selling book, but don't make the mistake of pitching how fabulous, incredible you are and how amazing this book is without telling them why they need to have you on.
So I know not everything is in here, but I'm looking back over my email. I categorize everything as a pitch that comes in. Like, I'm going to read a couple of headlines. Potential podcast guest for you, ? To me, that's not a good subject line.
No.
Podcast guest inquiry. I'm going to try to see if I can find a good one. There's not many of these in here, so I want to ask you what makes a good headline. Here's one of them. It's kind of interesting, I guess. Membership is like a box of chocolates.
Okay, so what does that mean? Is it sweet, or I have to pick the right chocolate? I might look at that.
I think I have to look at it to see what it is. Now, if I clicked on it, again, I don't know who these people are. That's a pitch for services, so it kind of got in the wrong place, but let me see if I can find another one. The Unicorn of Napa Valley.
I like that. I would look at that.
Yeah. And not just a buzzword, how Disney's mission drives its continuing success. But the biggest problem I have with these pitches, and you've kind of talked about it, but I just want to kind of hit this home because I think this is really helpful to everyone. I'm going to switch back to you so I can see you. It's the I'm awesome email. There's literally, I get 3 to 5 of these a day of how awesome someone is. And they will be nice enough to go, love your podcast. You're doing a great job. Nothing specific. They could have said the same thing to 40 other podcasts. And then they just kind of like really go, I think that they think they're doing well. They'll say, there's companies that are closing every day. And here's a stat. They give some wild stat, and you're supposed to pay attention to these stats. They don't really get my attention. But then the rest of the email is 7 ways they're awesome.
Right. And that does not sell.
Does not work for me.
No, it doesn't sell. I'll give you an example of a pitch. I just got this. This is as we are sitting here talking. And it says, can any company offer a chance of 90,000% ROI despite severe market volatility? That could be interesting.
Yeah.
And this goes on to say it's about this platform where that's what they do. And they're saying that they do this in real time. And it's 2 well-known entrepreneurs. And this is a pitch to me. So, and then they even have on this is something you could put if you're brief, you're provocative, and you prove why we want to have you on. They actually put sample questions on it. So one of the questions is, how exactly can transparent business boost productivity 15 to 40% and eliminate overbilling. And then they go through that. So then if I read the questions, I would get the idea of, okay, this is what we're going to be talking about.
So on subject lines in the pitch, what do we avoid?
Avoid making a pitch that's generic and boring, that where you say how great you are, you mentioned that, and usually that comes in the body, but sometimes it comes right at the top because that's not going to interest anyone unless you're famous. If you're super famous, like Khloe Kardashian available to talk about making the Forbes list, of course, yes, I want to have her on, fine, to talk about that. Or I don't, but at least I know.
Or how about, I think it was yesterday, Kylie Jenner is now the youngest billionaire ever.
Yes. Oh, that's a perfect example, right? Now, on the other side of that, you could take that and say, is there anyone in your, something where it relates to growth? Would you like to have her growth? If you could somehow tie those two together, that would be kind of clever. So that goes to the newsjacking again and taking something that's not related. It's like that reverse engineering that does make you think, ooh, okay, we could bring her up. And then you tell me how that's nearly impossible, Kate.
So we talked about the avoiding, and what are the things that make a good subject line? And I'll tell you my best open subject line ever. And this is mostly for speaking, but it works pretty brilliantly almost any time. It's very simple. Name of the company or name of the organization.
Exactly.
It gives you nothing else in there. I guess it's a curiosity play. Like I sent out one the other day to Spanx.
Uh-huh.
And I thought about for a long time, like, what am I going to make in this subject line? And I'm like, what are they going to open? That's all it is. It's like, what are they going to open? And I go, Spanx. Like, what is that? Like, I can't even just like throw it away because maybe it is something. That's the number one open I have.
I think it's good. One of the if it's something where somebody's connected me to somebody about a keynote speech and they haven't reached out to me, I'll give you the example. So I just say, speak at boom, the event, right? Because I'm a busy meeting planner. So why do I have to hear woman who broke the glass ceiling, won an Emmy, lost it on the road, ate 1 million hot dogs? That would lose me. But if you just say, you're right, if you just say exactly what it is, interview opportunity, boom, for, the Kate Delaney show, et cetera. And then ... That's a good way to do it. Or something provocative that works.
All right. So we've talked about subject lines. What about you said who, what, when, and why? Those are the 4. Is that it?
Yes. Who, what, when, why, and where.
Okay. So
like, let's say you're going to be in town or you're pitching that, then you could put the where in there. The where is just kind of the question mark, but the why is big.
That leads me to believe, and I'm not trying to be a devil, I'm just trying to understand, like you started this whole thing out and I wrote it down. Brevity sells.
Yeah.
I've got it highlighted. I've got it ready to go. Brevity sells. How do we write an email with the who, what, when, why, and where with brevity? You
can write it just like that. You could even put it why, boom, boom. Why do you care? Because X, Y, Z. And it's really just a short sentence. It's just laid out just like that. Okay. And it's not a big, well-engineered, put together 5 paragraphs. Because if they want more information, they're going to get that from you. And usually it's about those snap decisions, honestly, with the media. Like, oh, this really fits. I'm interested in this. And then if they need something from you, that's what they'll do. They'll ask you, hey, great, would you send us some sample questions? Hey, great, would you send us a copy of your book? Would you send us... So if I'm going to be on TV, I just had this happen to me where it was that World Cup story I gave the example of. They wanted a copy of my book because, good for me, they put up a copy of the book when they were talking to me. And actually I didn't plug it, they plugged it. And they asked for a couple of other things like my bio. They wanted a couple of quick highlights. So I gave them some bullet points. So even though they could look me up, they knew who I was. I gave them the bullet points, and that's what they wanted.
So short sentences. I always think too, like bold and unique. And, you picked up on my dancing. One reason why I have dancing inside there is because I wanted to bring a piece of me to the stage that no one else is doing, and from a memorable standpoint. Now, I fully expect, most people I've shared this with, they love it. They think it's very engaging. Now, I do get a lot of people going, as long as you don't call on me to dance. They want to see someone else up there. They don't want to see themselves. But that's the purpose of doing it, because I talk about, facing fear and shifting your identity. What would you tell us about this unique element? Because a lot of people think, well, I'm an accountant. I don't have anything unique about what I do, or I'm a business coach, or I'm a speaker. What do you say about getting attention through that unique element?
Well, first of all, it's a problem if you don't think you're unique. You need to sit down with yourself, and you need to write on. I talk about this. I get hired to speak about it a lot, and it goes with branding. But what's your wow? How do you clearly, confidently describe what you do, who you are? Why do we care? It goes back to the why do we care? A lot of times it has to deal with numbers. So when you say, well, I'm just a business growth guy, or I'm just a whatever, well, really, how much money have you saved companies? 20 million? How much, what have you produced? I guarantee if it's going down that lane, there's probably some very sexy number. That's the reason why you have the job you have. That's the reason why you are the expert. And if you don't think you're an expert, that's a problem that beyond even the media. Again, you have to find out what your wow is. Because even if you were networking, for goodness sake, people, even though we can go to our iPhones and just get information that way and exchange information that way, if your card just has a label on it and you're in a really unique, great convention or networking opportunity, and you're just handing out cards that have have a label on it that nobody gets what your wow is, then start there. And it's the same thing with pitching the media. You have to sit down, just like we said at the beginning, and you're doing that targeting. Tell us what is unique about you. And there's going to be something. You uncovered it. And you uncovered it. You and I had that conversation where you saw something unique on a stage and you realized, light bulb moment, oh, well, I do this and this would really fit, and it works with what I'm doing in my speeches. So it's not odd, but it's incredibly different, and that's unique and can draw people to you.
When you think about my wow, is it immediately the dancing, or is there something else that comes up?
I think it's the dancing, and then of course your business acumen, what you've been able to do for people, how you've helped them change their culture, grow their culture. I think it's really growth is a big piece of this, and who doesn't want that? So if I hear that you used XYZ and have created this much wealth for however many companies, that's pretty interesting to me. Especially if I'm a business reporter or I'm doing something related to business. It's like business in the ballroom.
I know we've gone over here, so I want to be respectful of your time, but I would like to dive in a little bit further. Can you spend a little more time with this?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get really specific, because I would say this normally, and a friend of mine actually helped me see it, but he goes, how many people have you interviewed about growth? And I go, over 300. And that's an easy number for me to come up with, because I've had my podcast for over 5 years. We've done over 400 episodes. Not all of them are about growth, but I've also done hundreds of interviews, not even on the podcast, with the founders of the fastest growing companies. So I feel like I have the most interviews of anyone I know with the Inc. 5000 level owners, just to understand how they think about growing their business. So that's a big number I do, is 300, more than 300. And then the other one is I've had 7 clients make the Inc. 5000 list. So they're considered the fastest growing companies in USA. And of course, I write for Inc. And it's even uncomfortable when I say this, but writing for Inc. puts me in front of 21 million page views per month. And last year I did 75 articles.
So you could say you're the king of growth. I mean, if you wanted to be just blunt about it, and then why? So the reason why is list the numbers. This. Okay, we could give you that title, you know. Why am I America's #1 female sportscaster? Somebody called me that, and that stuck. Why am I this has started to happen to me lately. Simon Sinek is the why, and I'm the wow, because I teach people how to find their wow, and it's working, and I've created wealth that way for people because they didn't have that equation down. You've created wealth for people by doing what you just said, and by also finding out the secret sauce of how does this work for people. So now you have a formula, and you tell me that formula, and if I follow it, I have a chance at success because you've seen it work, and you've also implemented or helped people implement that in their companies. So that is you're the double threat.
So I'm not violently opposed, and I know a lot of things that you have to lean into the courage, because I talk about this all the time, but king of growth, I'm like, that would not be something I would call myself, but is it what you think I should want? I mean, I want, when they think of growth, like this is kind of a conversation I've had with my team, is when someone thinks growth, I want my name to come up, just like with why Simon's comes up, or vulnerability or shame come up. Who do you think of?
Brene Brown.
Yeah. So I would love for any time where there's a growth conversation, like who do we get for this, for it to be me. So I know that, the whole targeting and all the, getting out in more media, is there anything else I should be doing to kind of plant those seeds and engineer that?
Well, I think if you work that whole media angle, that would certainly help.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to have that tagline. If you're going to call yourself the king of growth, or whatever, it doesn't have to be that, but whatever it is, you need to really use that. It's like me using the wow. That's why so many people just call me up. I want the wow. They just know they've heard of me connected to the wow. And then I have to explain it more. So that means I'm really getting branded with the word that I trademarked. What's your wow? And it would be the same thing for you. So the more people connect you to that, and you gave really huge examples. Simon Sinek is very famous. Brene Brown is very, very famous. We talk about Tim Ferriss, very, very famous. And the reason why is because it's quite clear that they are owning that space. And certainly Brene Brown, guess what? She's not the only one that talks about shame. And there are really good people, and she would tell you that talk about that same area. And maybe in other ways they have experience. Business growth, a lot of people claim that they are the business growth expert. You can look that word up and you'll see it all over the place. So you want to own that. If that's what you feel you do and you have the proof, that's your expertise. And people need to know that. And sure, by the way, for people listening, you can have I don't necessarily believe there's only one lane. You just don't want too many. We don't want to be stuck in traffic in LA. I visualize LA, and if I'm stuck in traffic in LA, I'm not happy. So if I have that many lanes, it's not good. But just because you're owning something that you know is your expertise, it doesn't mean that there aren't other drippings underneath that. Even Brene Brown has that. Even Simon Sinek has that, because they're always trying to leverage what they do so well into a little bit of the other areas that work for them too.
I will say that I understand what you're saying, but I will also go from my perspective, because I've done literally probably 100 episodes on niching, and I've interviewed a lot of companies that are just so narrowly niched, and they have such an easier time building traction.
Yeah.
If you can't build traction in one area, it's really hard to build it in 5.
Oh, I agree with you. You're excellent at that, and you and I talked about that even off air, I'll call it. And you're absolutely right. If you can't build traction, but I'm saying if you are the monster truck and you have built massive traction, then you can do that. But certainly not if you haven't done that.
And kind of that's where I've grown as a business owner. So taking the audience back, if you don't know me before this, 6 years ago when I leaned into this coaching full time, I started out with web designers. and I worked and I did speaking for, 15, 20 different events. I still have a client today. Thank you, Damon. From 5 years ago, from a speech that's still with me.
Wow.
And I love working with him. He does more than web design right now with his technology development company, but I grew past that to reach these new markets. And sometimes I feel like maybe I've grown too fast because it's not as comfortable knowing exactly that one market, but I knew the bigger stages, the bigger clients, the bigger work is at this next level. And there's been a few levels in between there, but right now I'm focused on the corporate. And when you look at my brand, because that's where we're kind of doing a different interview, is there anything else besides what we talked about today that we need to highlight if the focus is more corporate, being known and being seen as the celebrity? And I know that's kind of weird, but in the speaking world, it's not weird because we get beat out all the time because someone is known more than us, probably, right?
Yeah, that goes to the media angle of it. That's why the media is important. I always laugh when people say, oh, media doesn't matter. That's not true. Not if you're leveraging it and using it correctly, because the more you're seen, the more you're quoted. I mean, look, that's Simon Sinek and Brene Brown. Brene Brown got on Oprah's radar. She didn't intend to do that, but then she was goaded in a way into doing a TEDx talk, and she went and did it. And then sure enough, yes, she was a professor. Yes, she had all of this, history and had statistics and put a book together, but she was not known. She could have been somebody else who wrote a fantastic book but didn't get known, but she got on the radar of somebody pretty big, and then that just spread like wildfire from there. So there is absolute power in that. But you don't get to play in the big leagues if you're not trying to at least get out there in any league you can, meaning media, regionally, locally, all that stuff, which is, I guess, the same thing, but broadening that and then going nationally, that is the key. Because how do you become a celebrity? More people are paying attention to you, and more people are paying attention to you outside of your niche. I mean, even if they're the people that hire you, you're expanding beyond. Like Malcolm Gladwell is a good example of that. Who is Malcolm Gladwell? I love Malcolm Gladwell. I like listening to him. I like his books. I've read every single one of his books. But why did he become sexier than the lane that he was in? Because he was provocative. 10,000 hours, that's what you need. And, to become the expert, he had the big statistic out there that people debated was false or it was right or it was whatever.
We haven't talked about that much. Like, I think for any of this to work, and this is just my opinion, is you've got to know where you stand on the issue. This is a great example, the 10,000 hour rule. And if anyone who's not aware of that, you need to go look it up. But the basic idea is mastery comes when you've worked at something 10,000 hours. And some people have say they've disproven it to be more provocative. But at the time when this came out, it was huge because it explained why there's no such thing as an overnight success.
Yeah.
And how do you think I should or could be more provocative in what I'm doing?
Well, again, you have to look at your numbers and you have to decide. You have to really hone in on that wow. What is the wow? What are people going to say? Wow, that's interesting. If there's reverse engineer something you do, is there something that you say that I'll give you another example of that. Remember Kiyosaki and all of his books, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad thing. Again, it's another book, another guy, he's in real estate writing this, so who cares? Except for that he took the anti-approach of what they were saying in housing and what they were saying in real estate. So that made him interesting to people, like, wow, what's he saying? Why is he saying that? A lot of times you don't take the anti-approach just to necessarily take it, but if you're not swimming down that same stream that everybody else is swimming down, then that can be a really good thing. And you use that, hone that in, and get that message out. You have to figure out what that message is. I'm a great example of that because I'm an anomaly. And you said it when you asked me to talk about the sports thing, because I was a journalist and I was a really good anchor and had awards and all that kind of thing. But once I went to sports and I broke the glass ceiling, I became very interesting to people of what makes you think you can do that? Why did you do that? I swam against the stream. So just by swimming against the stream, I made myself interesting to people. I wasn't intending to do that, and I never thought about it until I sat down and started to look at that. So that's the same thing you have to do.
Let me ask you a question, because I think this is one of the areas where I can be provocative, and I play around with it different ways, but I'm going to just be blunt with you, and maybe we can shape it a little bit. I asked over 300 founders, as a leader, what's more important to you, customer first or employee first?
And what'd they say?
What do you think they said?
I'm going to say that they said customer.
So 94% of the fastest growing companies said it's employee first.
And that's good. It should be that. It really should.
So and I've talked to, service-based brands like Focus Brands CEO. They have Cinnabon and Moe's Southwestern Grill and all these chains. They're like, look, we want to make sure those employees feel really taken care of, so that every experience with a customer, they take care of those customers. And there's many variations of that. I've interviewed the CEO of Home Depot. He's like, we want them to think like they own the building, not our name out there. So that's one area where I'm going to be leaning into this, basically going the truth and lies of customer first. What do you think about that?
Well, and see, I think that's good, because look at what my natural reaction was, customer. And why is that? Because I've certainly been on the sales side, and all that people always emphasize, customer first, customer first, customer first. But I agree with you. I think, and that's why I think that's really good, is I do a thing about recruit, retain, and romance people who work with you. And why is that? Because I don't want to have all these replacement costs of hiring people who don't want to be with me. You said it. The employees, and Home Depot's right. You want to keep those good employees. Why? Because they are happy and they're good with the customers.
So it's controversial, and I know it's a hard decision. And the way I kind of phrase it is, if you have a marketing and sales kind of viewpoint of the world, you're going to say customer first, because that's what you're taught.
Mm-hmm.
But the question was, is the leader's job to focus on customers first or the employees first? The leader's job is to focus on employees so that the employees can put the customer first. And so fast growth companies are really employee first and customer centric.
Right. That's good.
So that's kind of my provocative area that gets people. We didn't plan this, because you honestly were like, it's customer.
Right.
Now, when I talk to fast growing companies, like I was just at the Great Places to Work conference, guess what? Every one of them goes, it's employee first. They get it.
Yeah, they get it, and they're right.
So I don't know. Do I need more than just that, or can I just ride that like a wave until something else comes up?
I think you ride that and see where it goes.
Okay.
Because it goes back to what you said before of not getting too convoluted. See what happens with it, because you can always, it doesn't take away from anything you're doing. So yeah, absolutely.
You like that phraseology of it, the truth and lies of customer first?
Yeah.
So that it doesn't tell you what it is first. It just says, why is it not customer? Like, I just want to spark curiosity. Would that be a good pitch that you can make to someone, I don't know the right framing of it, but we would talk about that?
Sure. I mean, you could even shorten and say customer is not number one. Boom.
Yeah.
The myth of the customer being number one, anything like that. You can play around with the words, but I think that's, because you can say then, I interviewed this many people, this many leaders, and here's what they said, and here's what I've seen. So if your company isn't focusing on that, which, by the way, there's a lot of companies that don't focus on that. They don't, even though maybe they should. That's part of the problem.
Yeah. There's many reasons behind it. So you don't need a lot of these, as I guess you're saying. If you can take a provocative statement, Malcolm Gladwell is prolific. So that example, like he's got many different aspects of what he's done. So I won't try to put myself in the same category, but this is one I've discovered through my deep work, and I just need to write it better.
Right. And you found it, so you put it out there and you see what happens with it. But that's what I teach people to do. You find that wow, because once you have the wow, then you go, once we discover the wow, then you ride it and see what happens with it. But like you said, and I brought up, Gladwell is the prime example of that.
I'm going to be honest with you here, because this is a safe space between you and the audiences right here listening, because you're coaching me. I have resisted writing this customer first or employee first kind of thing too much in ink. Not because I'm scared of it or don't believe it in it all. I've been trying to figure out how to play it, because I would rather be interviewed on it than write about it.
Right. And
I'm working with, some people out there to get this perspective out there, because it's better in a media standpoint. A lot of people would love to write for ink, and it is a great honor, but it's better when someone writes about me.
Right. But if you're trying to become the celebrity and the known person, and you're shooting high, then you have to realize it has to be about you, because if not, you're not the Simon Sinek. You're not the Brene Brown. You're not those people. It's
interesting that you use those two, because 2 weeks ago, I tried another valiant effort to get them on the show and get to write about them for Inc. And Inc. is a little bit more of a draw than the Leaders in the Trenches podcast. It just is, because of the media, the national media aspects of it. And so I reached out specifically to Simon's team, put a very thoughtful pitch together. Right, I'm really trying to get him on for me to write about his new book coming out. And I did the same thing with Brene, and I took time to do this. And I actually laughed when I got the rejection letters, because they were very well done. They were very nice, but they're like, we're not in a news cycle right now. We're heads down on this. They're so known and so famous that they turn down media that most people would be like, absolutely, like put me in. What do I need to do? And I just smiled and I said, it'd be nice to be that way.
And that's when you get to the top of the mountain and you break through the wall. And that's why they're that way. Even with speeches, they have a set number that they'll take, and they have people around them, and they do not just do speeches. They're booked. She's booked out 2 years in advance almost.
What, as we start to wrap this up, leverage, like getting the media is one thing, but what do you do with it afterwards that makes it more even powerful than just the showing up on the radio segment or showing up on, some kind of news day or morning show?
You take pieces of it and you share it all over the place. You blow it up all over social media. And that way, just because you were on a radio show, you might have had an incredible appearance, said something provocative, something useful people can use, but they didn't hear it because you did that in Atlanta and I'm in California. But hey, I like your stuff, or I'm interested in that. So why not broaden the net? Most people, the mistake they make is they don't share it afterwards anywhere. And sure, it lives on your real estate, on your website, but who cares? How about the rest of the world hearing that or seeing that?
So I would call that not necessarily just sharing, but that's just promoting that piece of content. I'm a content creator. I'm not going to apologize for it, but I create content. And I actually do a better job this past 12 months than I've ever done to share the content that we're creating. This podcast will be sliced up and put into, Instagram and LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and some other places as well. And we do this as a repurposing strategy. And that's part of the promotion. But I think there's always more things I could be doing to do this, because a lot of people just aren't willing to promote. Is there an example you can think of someone that did something really well that allowed them to get mileage out of a moment?
I'll just use myself. I've become more and more of a celebrity because people are more aware of how much media coverage I'm getting. So I didn't used to do that. I used to be on big shows, interesting shows, whatever they were, and I didn't really share that out there because I'm too busy, and I wasn't thinking, well, that's not, who cares? I'm glad I did it, and that's terrific, but I'm already in the media. But I realized there was power outside of my own media, so I'm the great example of it. And when I started to share things, I've gotten booked half a dozen times at very big conventions because people saw the swell of the media around me and that people wanted to talk to me. That made meeting planners way more interested in me because now I'm not just Kate the speaker. Now it's like, wow, she was on this, she was on that. Here's what she said. And plus they could see me. So with the television things, they can see, oh, you become a real person in how you look and what you're saying. And that's almost like an extra sizzle reel. So for me, using myself as an example, that's become very powerful when I've done that.
I want to ask you one question to maybe drive this home. How often would it be to, let's say you get a good piece, right? You're on a local radio station. You get to talk about your business. You can talk about something you're doing. How often would you share that without worry that it's too much? Would it be once every month, once every quarter, once every 6 months? Or do you think it's something else?
No, I think it'd be once or twice a month, depending on what it is.
Okay.
And it's also the way you share it. So if I say that I share relevant and valuable content. I'm a content curator, definitely, with my journalism background, et cetera, just like you in a different way. So I want you to see those nuggets. So it's not like when I'm sharing it with the world, I'm also not being overly braggadocio that, hey, here I am on the cover of People magazine, which of course I wasn't, but I was in People magazine. Here I am in People magazine. Why do you care? Again, it goes back to the quick why. Guess what? Bum, 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 bum. Especially for like LinkedIn. It depends on where you're placing it too, which makes a big difference.
Something just triggered for me too, because I appreciate that. 1 to 2 times, I think probably I would have never done it that much. I don't mind, this podcast will come out. I'll share it a lot that week. And we need to do a little bit better job of pulling up the archive. Like the things that we did 3 months ago are still evergreen. But I also don't want to overload. We create a lot of content. But there should be some key pieces, these cornerstone pieces I would think of, that you would go, they should be shared at least once a month, if not more. And maybe you do it in different ways, in different channels, right?
Absolutely. You nailed it. That's what the key is. And it's not too much. I mean, of course, every day, ridiculous overload. Yes, I agree. But again, you have to remember, people are busy. They're not paying attention. You may miss them the first time around. But guess what? On the second time, they get it. So that's why that is valuable. I find what's happened to me, I've seen this happen lately. And again, that's because for lack of a better way to describe it, my star is rising. People that have interviewed me have shared stuff that they've done with me, and I'll see it pop up, and I'll say, wow, I did that a year ago. But they have a good picture, they're with me, there's something relevant, so it doesn't hurt me, but they're trying to draft off of me and saying, oh, I interviewed her. So that's how you also know that things are happening for you when people are resharing again and again and again, and it's smart on their part, and then I see it and it makes sense. And that's what happens with super famous people. So we use the examples of, if we're going to use the business type person that has the relevant content, Brene Brown and Simon Sinek. His stuff, you see his stuff, and how often, if you Googled it or whatever search engine you use, if you look through it, you'll see how many times something he's done has come up and been shared here, but it's old.
I appreciate us going through this, because I think a lot of people are so afraid of self-promoting themselves too much, and the humble brags, and we know we see this, and there's some people that that really go overboard. But if people paid attention to us as much as we thought they did, we'd probably all be rich.
That's it. I mean, here's a great quote. Alan Weiss, who some of you may know. If you don't, you can certainly look him up. He says, if you don't toot your own horn, who's going to do it?
I want to give you one last chance, and this is really specific to me because I want to make the most of this, and maybe I need to frame this differently. I booked a gig in May, and part of the gig comes with, because they couldn't pay my full fee, just being honest. And so I said, well, how do we get that to balance out? What other things can we put with this? Well, they're going to do the recording, which is great. It's going to be a good like 500 person audience. So I'm excited about that. But then they also said, we run a print magazine and we're going to print your article in our magazine as I don't think I've ever gotten an article in the print version of any magazine. I take that back. I did in 1993, but let's just assume that that's too old to apply. And no one's read that industry magazine that was the electrical industry. But is there anything I should be asking for or using that in that print? I did ask for, I think they're called tear sheets, right?
Right.
Examples that I could send to someone in part of my, for a speaking gig or something like that. Is there anything else I should be looking at with that?
It's smart of you to ask for the tear sheets. That was good. Another thing to ask the meeting planner is, do you have any media connections?
Okay.
Do you have any media connections that you could hook me up with because I don't know what the gig is for what we're doing, and they might, because you never know. If you don't ask them, you don't know if the meeting planner does, and sometimes they do. And
if they do, that's a good leverage point. But then I could also go back to what you talked about earlier and say, hey, I'm going to be in Toronto for this gig. I think it's called Your Workplace. It's about culture. And so it might be something they want to cover. Right. And that would be smart because now you're leveraging that and you're there speaking and it's all good. It's also good for the meeting planner because if you go your own route and they see that, it's like, wow, he's getting covered. Are you kidding? That happens to me all the time and they're shocked. They open their morning paper and they're like, you were in the paper. I can't believe it, because I leveraged what I knew how to leverage. And so that, or you were on the news at the morning show, whatever, it helps. I want to give you one chance to poke at me. To poke at you. What am I doing wrong? Well, you haven't been doing the things that get you the exposure. Yeah. So, exposure becomes this dirty word when you're around certain people or in the speaking community, and you have to realize that's not true. I mean, yes, I understand you're not speaking for free or you're not leveraging marketing dollars. That's a whole different business thing. But when you're talking about if you want to become known, you got to work at it. You cannot be passive. You cannot say, oh, I can only share this once in a while. You cannot worry about what people think because you think you're a rock star. You want people to know you're a rock star and you want to explode your business. So if you want to be in that lane, you have to own that and you have to realize deep in here, I have something valuable to share. And if I make millions and millions and millions of dollars, trust me, I have a philanthropic side. I'll share it or I'll do whatever. So don't let your brain fight with, ooh, am I an egomaniacal person? It's not about that because the world, it's very tough to get heard in this world. And if you don't put yourself out there, nobody's gonna find you. They're not gonna find you on their own. There are a lot of business growth people. There's a lot of people who deal with the word leadership and culture, and they're probably nowhere near as good as you are. But how are they getting known? Yeah, I don't have a problem of being proud of who I am and putting myself out there. It's more or less like, will this extra work pay off long term? Because none of what we really talked about today is short term. I mean, I think there are some things that can come up short term, but it really is more long term. And I am in the business long term. I'm not here to just make a buck this month. Like, you wouldn't have a podcast for 5 years if that's what you wanted. I am looking long term, but you're suggesting that I just lean in a little bit harder toward the media side, not in me being the media, but actually getting covered by the media.
Absolutely. And then you don't overwhelm yourself where you're ignoring your business. Of course not. None of that. But you know how to do this. So you said it. I say this all the time. It's leverage and the long game. Leverage and the long game. So you know it's going to take time. That's okay, because every little hit is a step in the right direction. And if that's what you want, then that's what you do. You take the leap and you start moving toward it. And that's how you'll get it. Because it does take time. It's certain, and you said it before when you were even talking about your clients, it's true. It's not, or we were talking about Malcolm Gladwell, it's not overnight success. That's not what usually happens.
Yeah. Well, we've gone way, way over the longest episode maybe I've ever done. I want to say thank you. If our audience is interested in following you and finding their wow and dealing their destiny, where would you point them to?
The best place to go is katedelaney.com. Of course, like everyone else, I have a couple of other places, but katedelaney.com is probably the best, or dealyourown.destiny.com.
Perfect. I want to thank you again for being here, and I'm trying to be as coachable as possible through this. I do want more of what we talked about. It is something I think about a good bit as the business is evolving, and I appreciate the kind of step-by-step and helping me figure out what's most important. I know when I hate getting pitched the wrong way, so I'm always careful to do it as right as I can. So I appreciate your insights.
Yep, excellent. It was fun being with you. Good luck. Nail it.
Fantastic. Love this. I know it was a lot longer than normal, but we just got into some of the details of this, and I showed some of my insecurities around what I'm doing and how often I'm sharing my message. But let me rest assured that I really believe in what I'm doing, and I think you should too. I think if you are making a difference, if you have clients that are getting the results that you're promising, and you are doing this in a way that really supports them and guides them to do it faster than they would have done it on their own, then you really are someone that should be leveraging the media every way possible. So hopefully you've got some joy out of this. I'd love to know the impact you're making, reach out to me, send me an email, gene@genehammett.com. And if you have any questions, make sure you just go ahead and ask me. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.